of introducing the UK's first international education strategy. And I'll be talking about in a moment why I believe we can't turn back and why we need a new international education strategy that reflects a changing world, as well as reflecting on the fact that the strategy from 2019 has met its targets. And therefore, we need a refresh, but not just a refresh, a reimagining of what is possible for the future, a reimagining that's based on not just outputs, but on outcomes. I'm delighted to be joined in this event today by Dr. Diana Beech, the CEO of London Higher, and also Lil Bremermann-Richard, the CEO of Oxford International. And in terms of the format, I'm going to give a speech on why I think change is needed. I'm then going to sort of turn to Diana first and then to Lil to give their own reflections. And then we're going to open up to a bit of a discussion. So in terms of if you want to raise a point or ask a question, do raise your hand. That will help me as the moderator for identifying yourselves. And when it comes to identifying yourselves, I think one of the issues we have sometimes with Zooms on these group conversations is that quite a few people who've joined have been named as Charlotte Head, who works as the administrator for Oxford International. Obviously, your name is not Charlotte Head, but I'm unable to differentiate between yourselves. So if you see yourself as being named as Charlotte Head, please just quickly click into the top right-hand corner where you're able to rename yourself. Please do sort of just quickly, as and when you want to go in, and you can do that fairly easily. I've had to do it myself, and I'm completely technocratically illiterate. So if I can do it, you certainly can as well. But also, if you don't want to raise a point publicly, but you wanted to make a point which I can reflect on, please do put it in the chat function, and I'll be able to bring that back into the conversation that we'll have. And we'll look to end promptly at 3 o'clock. So when we come to looking at international students, I've always proudly believed that this is one of our greatest opportunities that the UK possesses. And I've always believed that the UK government shared that vision, which is why we took forward the international education strategy in 2019, both with the Department for Education, but also the Department for International Trade, recognizing that huge export opportunity that international students, that international education provides the United Kingdom. And we set two targets, two headline figures back in 2019. The first was obviously a numerical target of the number of international students we believed it would be possible to bring to the United Kingdom. There was a concerted action behind the sector to achieve this, and that was the 600,000 international student figure target. And we were looking, I think, at around a base rate of 350, 400,000 when the target was formulated. And the second target was a numerical one based on the export opportunity of a wider educational products that could be sold both in person but also online, transnational education, looking at that opportunity to build partnerships with emerging markets for the future. Since then, both those targets have been achieved quite remarkably, really, given that we'd set them into 2030. So finding that the targets have been set, achieved 7 years before they were meant to, clearly demonstrates that that initial 2019 strategy was too conservative. And I think now we have the opportunity to be bold and to be better in our approach. But at the same time, I think we need to reflect that we have gone through a variety of changing circumstances. No one expected the pandemic and COVID, and we can learn a lot of lessons, I think, from that experience about how we treat international students and their welfare for the future. And it's a really key point, I think, for what we want to do with this new commission, is that to have a student-first approach. At the same time, I'm conscious that many organizations, many of which will be attending this launch event today, have done a huge amount of work to identify the opportunities as well as the barriers that actually looking to seek to bring more international students to the UK can help the UK higher education sector. So this commission is not intended to cut across the fantastic work that Universities UK International, UKISA, the APPG on international students, the ACU, along with a number of mission groups have been taken forwards. We look at even the Student Futures Commission run in association with Wonky. Mary Cook's done a fantastic job in ensuring that international students aren't seen as an optional extra, but are really part of the mainstream experience on student campus. And we want to ensure that this commission can learn from the work that's already gone on, to synthesize that work and to be able to take it forwards. Because while we might have common agreement in our own sector of the value and importance international students bring, there is, I think, a beginning to emerge a cultural disconnect between the voice of the sector and the voice of government, and the voice potentially around some of the more populist siren voices. And I can reflect, I think, also on my own experience with net zero. And one of the reasons why I've decided to launch this commission is very much because I see a challenge and a potential threat emerging around the purpose of why we need international students in this country. And I don't want to see that undermined, both in the press or by the current government, that might seek to play a culture war when it comes to looking at the opportunities international students present. When I set up the Net Zero Support Group a little more than a year ago, I did so directly in response to a Guardian article which sort of set out that there was a net zero scrutiny group set up to challenge net zero. And I thought at the time, these people do not represent my voice or the majority voice of those in government. I think that's the same when it comes to international students. We have seen a couple of siren voices on the front page of the Telegraph conflating issues around domestic students with international students, claiming that international students are directly taking domestic student places, which we know to be false. And at the same time, looking at actually what is the future direction of government. And in this summer, I was particularly disturbed by the potential news that there would be a rollback on the post-study work student visa. And we have seen the enormous success the reintroduction of the 2-year post-study work visa has had in the United Kingdom. But at the same time, we face an international challenge with other countries such as Canada and Australia looking to extend their visa offers to go further. And we must remember that we are both facing inwards in this country in trying to attract international students for the future, but also outwards, that there are many other English-speaking nations who are looking to take a share of this market. And unless we look to change, unless we look to adapt, we potentially face the risk of losing future market share. But of course, it isn't all about the market. It isn't all about the money. And that's another really important factor, I think, that was missed out when it came to the first international education strategy, is that how can we ensure that when we set out an international student pathway to the future, it is a sustainable one, it is one that reflects the value and the voice of international students for the future. And that's why I think we need to create a new narrative around international higher education. We recognise that, yes, there is an economic opportunity for the UK, a huge driver of GVA, both not just nationally, but also regionally and locally. And I've always been struck by the work that Nick Hillman's done in HEPI on identifying in each local community how much international students do contribute economically. Work that's not really been taken up the heart of government and deserves to see that happen. But at the same time, what is the cultural benefit, the direct net benefit that international students bring to this country? And above all, to reset the narrative so that we focus on quality and not just on quantity. We can set the headline numbers of how many students that we wish to attract to the UK, but it must also be about identifying how we can sell UK higher education with respect to other countries, that they are identifying the UK as being the highest value offer for the future. And then what are the opportunities for the future as well for the UK to think differently about higher education? Now, that could be around a variety of different course offerings, around looking at how transnational education can provide that magnetic effect. So what are the risks? What are the risks of not acting, as I've mentioned, inaction, but also what are the risks around a lack of sustainability within the sector? Thinking about overdependence on particular nations. And I think this is a challenge that the sector does need to rise to. That when we look for the future about how universities recruit, how can we ensure that they do so in a way that isn't going to put their own business models in danger? How we can ensure that the sector and individual institutions recognise the importance of diversity in their pipelines for international students. And so these questions are ones I want the Commission to look at, and for the sector to take an open and honest view, challenging any sort of suggestion that international students are going to be a drag on economic performance, that somehow when we look at the opportunities international students present, we don't want an anti-growth coalition to be victorious here, and that we recognise the growth opportunities international students present, but at the same time hold a mirror back to ourselves and be open and honest about the challenges that a growth in numbers has presented the sector and what we can do to ensure that we address that. And then when we take that narrative forwards, to then work separately on what does a new international higher education strategy look like. And in this, I would like to posit a few suggestions. Now, these are my suggestions, they're not comprehensive. The whole point of taking this commission forwards is to ask the questions, to be able to engage with each other, to be able to come forward openly and democratically with new suggestions, rather than sort of closed shop that I think probably happened in the past with the first international higher education strategy, that we work as a sector to identify what we wish to happen, what is the change we wish to see, and how can we then articulate that into government for the future. So in terms of a strategy, and I think we must need to work on moving away from just simple sort of paper targets and really think about what a delivery strategy looks like. What does an implementation framework look like? Because talk's cheap, I should know that as a politician, but nevertheless, the most effective way we can use resources, given that we must understand resources are going to be constrained in the future, is to do so in more efficient ways, to be able to work together, to collaborate and to coordinate in order to speak with one voice. So I'm very interested in taking forward a commission that is going to cast its net more widely, working with a wider range of actors and agencies in order to identify what is the opportunities, not just for the UK nationally, but also locally and regionally. And Diana Beech is going to speak later, obviously, on the pioneering work she's taken forwards in London Higher in setting out a London higher education strategy. I really do think that is potentially the way forwards for international education. Secondly, to think about our target markets for the future. I think one of the big changes that's happened in the past 3 years is we know more about those emerging markets. We can identify not just nationally those countries which we know are a growth opportunity, but regionally within those countries, we can identify where we can recruit for the future. And how can we use that data to the best purposes is I think, a really important question. Thirdly, what is the ask from government? I think once the sector itself identifies how it can frame its common challenges and opportunities, what do we need to see government take forward? Now, obviously, one of the key questions, one of the outputs that is always asked is obviously, what does the visa regime look like? And I'm keen to ensure that, as I say in the title of the speech, there is no turning back. We need to ensure that we maintain the 2-year post-study work visa. Personally, I feel there is a strong opportunity to move to 3 or 4 years. Now, whether that's going to be the direction of the travel of the government is another matter. But we must remember also that we're talking not just about this administration, but about also framing a manifesto conversation for 2024. So even if this government does not act on taking forward some of the recommendations in the Commission, I'm keen to work with all political parties in making the non-partisan case of why international students should feature in every political party's manifesto. And then also to think about what are the barriers that government are potentially able to help remove. So that might be around maintenance, that might be around understanding what is the potential for working with international students on every point of contact that they come in contact on their journey to the UK. And it is that student first approach that I passionately believe that we do need to focus on a more fine-grained approach. So thinking about accommodation. I know Jim Dickinson from Wonkeys focused on this closely in the past. And when I was Universities Minister, I was very determined to ensure that we had an accommodation strategy. I never succeeded in that, unfortunately. I think one of the tragedies has been, we've only had one international education strategy since 2019. We seem to have had about 4 or 5 universities ministers, but nevertheless, the challenge of focusing on accommodation hasn't gone away. Indeed, it's become more acute. And I think the key question for me is, if we are looking to take forwards an advance in the 600,000 figure, we must recognise the challenge set down by the Home Office or by other detractors, is that where are these students going to find their accommodation? How can we ensure they have a holistic end-to-end experience that recognises that if they come to this country, it is not just about taking them through a university degree or a course, but also about a lifestyle that they must enjoy just as much as any other domestic student. So providing them with the accommodation that isn't miles away in a different city or town, isn't some private rented sector bedsit. We will fail if we do not address the welfare of all international students for the future. And then also to think about the experience on campus. I know a lot of universities and mission groups have focused on this since 2019, but how do we create the campus experience that sees the international student as integral to that campus and not simply an adjunct of it? Thinking also then about the welfare support, the language support that may be needed for students, and then also their future employability. Students may come to this country in order to get a degree, to go work back in their own country, and I hope they are seen then, they can take the UK and become ambassadors for the UK, having studied in this country. That's fantastic. But at the same time, with the 2-year post-study work visa, how can we ensure that the jobs that they may want to go on to do, recognizing we have a huge opportunity and a skills gap that needs to be filled, and I think international students provide that. One of the big questions I'm looking at in net zero, the net zero review, is obviously net zero skills. And so why aren't we using international students potentially to fill some of those skills gaps for the future is a really important question. But at the same time, how do we ensure that those jobs are high quality jobs, that students can come to the UK confident that they will then be earning immediately after qualifying? And then thinking also about, how do we maintain contact with students for the future in the sector, so that we see them as alumni, that we can work with them and invest in their lives as they progress through them. Finally, before I sort of hand over to Diana and then Lil, I just wanted to talk sort of briefly about the format of this commission. So in terms of focusing on a new narrative, focusing on strategy, and then focusing on implementation, we'd like to run this commission very openly and transparently. Support is being provided by Oxford International, but this is done on a pro bono basis. I'm keen that we take forward a number of online discussions, the next one of which will be taking place on the 12th of September at 12th of December at 2 p.m. and we'll be sending around sort of login details for that. But I'm keen that then we take forward within each of the sessions a segment of what I've been speaking about. So the first one will likely focus on visas, on the enabling framework, on the ask of government. Secondly, focusing on partnerships and how we can create that wider ecosystem to ask for that sort of what is the sector voice around international students. Thirdly, what's the international environment look like when it comes to recruitment? How do we create sort of future targets for international countries? And fourthly, how can we look at creating that student first approach? We will probably also be putting on regional events, which we are currently working with a number of partner universities, again, to look at how we can not just create a national strategy, but how we can also potentially create regional strategies that will help regional areas collaborate rather than just compete for the future, and to identify what are the common offers that maybe Manchester might be very different from Yorkshire, for example, different from the Southwest, different from London. How can we look at creating greater variety of opportunity? I think that's a really important chance in this particular strategy and this commission to look at how we do this differently. And then finally, when it comes to those targets for the future, what I'd like to do the commission is to turn things around. So before we created the numbers, we created the 600,000 figure, we created the 35 billion figure, and then we've worked to see how we can achieve those targets. What I'd like to do here is focus on the outcomes by working backwards. So ideally, we want to say, what is this? It's sustainable for the sector. What are the challenges we need to look at in order to engineer potentially a new target and to work towards what that target should be? So not to ask the question straight away about what the number should be, but to have this conversation and then to think about what the number should be on the back of those conversations, on the back of those policy frameworks and ideas that have come out of the commission, to bring to government a united voice about what we believe is a potential offer that international students can bring to the future. And then in terms of the commission, it will be populated by commissioners. I'm keen to ensure we have commissioners that represent the sector both geographically, regionally. So looking to get commissioners for every devolved nation, for example, is really important to me to make sure that we have a UK-wide approach. But at the same time that we really make sure that the student voice is heard in this commission. So we're looking for ensuring that we have international students and student unions, part of this conversation as well. But if you're interested in volunteering to be a commissioner, we've had a number of people come forward saying they'd like to be involved. We'd love to be able to hear from you. And in terms of this commission, we have a website, ihecommission.uk, and an email address, contact@ihecommission.uk. And so we will be looking to appoint commissioners who will be announced at that 12th of December meeting. I'm also reaching out to government to ensure that we hopefully will have a opportunity to speak with the new minister about their own ambitions and how the commission can work with government to be able to achieve a shared vision in the future. With that, I'd like now to hand over to Dr. Diana Beech, CEO of London Higher, who's been working, actively engaging on this question of a future international higher education strategy for London. So Diana, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and good afternoon, everyone. And again, thank you very much to Chris and the team at the Oxford International Education Group for hosting this important launch event today. As you just heard from Chris, I'm Chief Exec of London Higher, and that's the organisation providing a voice for almost 50, that's 50, universities and higher education colleges across the UK capital. And I'm really here today to wholeheartedly offer my endorsement to the establishment of this commission, both from a personal point of view, but also from a professional one. So let's address my personal interest in the commission first. And I should declare that I have an interest in seeing a new and updated international education strategy produced, because as some of you may know, I actually had the pleasure of working with Chris in the Department for Education during the launch of the government's initial international education strategy back in 2019. So I'm obviously keen to see its good intentions built upon and made more relevant to the present day. And then my personal interest, my professional interest, should I say, in this commission comes about because I'm extremely proud that my organisation, London Higher, was the first sector body to come forward with an international education strategy of our own last month. And if Charlotte clicks through to the next slide, you'll hopefully see, thank you, a link and a QR code on the screen in front of you for our international strategy for London. And in many ways, as Chris has said, that was our attempt to kickstart the move towards an updated national government strategy. And that's something I'm really pleased to see that this commission will soon be working towards, thanks to Chris Skidmore's initiative and support. And right now, I'm really going to be picking up on some of the points that Chris made about the importance of the regional dimension and also the individual institutional lenses in any new strategy that we create. Because when I came to my role at London Higher a couple of years ago, with the existing international education strategy fresh in my mind, if you like, it was always clear to me that London was in a good place to lead the creation of any new updated version of a strategy. Remember, London is home to the largest concentration of higher education institutions of any UK region, and not to mention it's consistently voted #1 destination of choice for international students and researchers, not just here in the UK, but of anywhere else in the world. So London and its strengths clearly need to be harnessed and protected if we're serious about meeting or even increasing our international education ambitions in the future. The size and scale of institutions in our capital makes it a bellwether for the UK higher education sector as a whole. And because global developments tend to hit London first, rightly or wrongly, over the past couple of years, the city has been at the forefront of dealing with challenges around changes to global mobility, around changes to student welfare, and around changes to the overall student experience after the pandemic. And the ever closer community that we've been building up between our members at London Higher meant that we already had networks through which different London institutions could come together and discuss some of these challenges. And in May this year, following a roundtable kindly hosted by Oxford International, we took it upon ourselves to channel these discussions into something positive, into the production of a regional specific international education strategy, fully aware that somebody needed to start the movement and we were probably best placed to do it. Yeah, I do want to stress that London is but one part of our national jigsaw. And as our capital, it's inextricably linked to other towns, to other cities, and to other regions right across the UK, each with their own unique opportunities and challenges. And that's why, where London now leads, I really hope that other regions will follow, so that together we can piece together a comprehensive plan which will enhance the UK's international appeal at the time when we clearly need it the most, at this time of global uncertainty. I think we'd all agree that the government's existing international education strategy has been an important statement of intent and a welcome commitment to growing international student numbers in the UK as a whole. But we cannot deny that there's much more to do to enhance its utility by institutions and by other key stakeholders on the ground. So what we've done at London Higher is really make the first attempt to add some much needed nuance to this strategy to make it work, both for our specific region, but also for the vast diversity of our membership. If you move on to the next slide, please, you'll see that because we are a representative body, we're not a mission group, we are uniquely positioned within the UK higher education sector to speak for a cross-section of providers. Our membership's large, it's place-based, which means that we instinctively embrace different provider types, and we're always alert to the need to make policy that works for institutions of different sizes, of different shapes, and of different specialisms. That's why we knew we had to create a strategy that contains different pathways and different recommendations that support all our region's institutions, from our large multi-faculty universities right through to our world-leading small specialist arts conservatoires and scientific research institutes, each of which we know may have their own admissions processes, their own target markets, and their own unique study options. And in devising the strategy, we also knew we had to create a document that draws upon the wealth of opportunity within the London region. So not just that contained within our unique London HE community, if you like, but that across local government, across business and industry, and across civil society. Because here's the rub. As much as London's higher education sector has a major role to play in upholding the capital's reputation as a global study destination of choice, our universities and colleges just cannot do this alone, and they're reliant on the willingness and the cooperation of wider city stakeholders to uphold our external image and to ensure that we're coming together to make London the best place to live, to study, and to work for generations to come. And our recommendations in our strategy reflect all of this. As you'll see from the next slide on the screen, our international education strategy calls on other influential organisations in the capital to work with us to enhance London's offer to students. And they include the Mayor of London, the Greater London Authority, London Councils, the Metropolitan Police, and the London Chamber of Commerce, each of which we believe has a significant part to play in ensuring a safe and welcoming student experience and maintaining the capital's unrivalled employability prospects. And we know we also need to work together with these stakeholders to tackle some of our challenges, which include, among others, the city's safety, security, and affordability challenges, all of which I think add some much needed humility to our efforts and really do stop us from becoming complacent. And as Chris has said, the UK government does have a role to play in all of this too. To better serve our region, we believe that there needs to be a dedicated international champion for London, international education champion, should I say, who can sit alongside those of other regions and devolved administrations. As I said, we're just one part of a whole. And so we can support Sir Steve Smith together in his work as overall UK champion. And we also call for the UK government to be much, much more ambitious in its visa offering. And what we call for is a single entry study visa, which would enable international students to come to the UK and potentially stay for 3 degrees right through up till their PhD, should they so desire, thereby helping to bolster the UK's research talent pipeline at the same time. And I'm just going to put my personal hat on again for a moment, shamelessly, but it has always been a mystery to me why the Department for Business does not share responsibility for the creation of the UK International Education Strategy, given that postgraduate researchers are students too. If we're serious about boosting international student numbers, then we need to be actively bringing research students into the mix to increase the likelihood of them staying here to power UK business and innovation with their talents and expertise. And with its fantastic links to UK industry, from the financial district right through to the West End, not to mention its key role in the Golden Triangle, I think London's offer to international students really is unparalleled. But we also can't emphasize enough that what comes to London does not necessarily stay in London. And once here, universities, colleges and employers right across the UK have the opportunity to benefit from London's international talent and researchers, and they may well decide to pursue further study or employment options elsewhere in the country, and it's only right and natural that they do so. So our international strategy isn't just a strategy for London, and you can move on to the next slide, please, but it's one that I really feel is of relevance to the success of the whole of the UK, and that's why I've put the QR code back on the screen again. I think devising an international education strategy for London as we have, it's really not about pitting London against the other UK regions, but it's about ensuring that our UK capital remains attractive against our global competitors. It's about giving us the best chance possible of persuading those who may be contemplating studying in other countries against turning their back on the UK and building their lives and careers elsewhere. And at London Higher, we may well have been the first out of the blocks in developing our own regional education strategy, but we need other regions to join us to ensure that we're adding the nuance that any new national strategy needs, not to mention maximising the retention of international talent right across the UK. And as an advocate for an international education experience, not just for those coming to the UK, but let's also remember the domestic students and researchers that get to benefit from having international students here. I'm hopeful that this commission will provide a strong basis from which to build bridges to and from the capital and right across the country to make the UK's future a truly international one. I'm really pleased to see that regional engagement will be a cornerstone of the Commission's approach, and I'm proud that at London Higher we've already gone some way to start this process and to show London's pivotal role in the development of any new national strategy, and that's a strategy that must work for all the UK regions and enhance their connectivity. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana, for setting out not just sort of the work you've been undertaking with London Higher on establishing this London international education strategy, but also I think setting the really sort of positive benefits and taking head on some of the disinformation that surrounds international students and that cross subsidy that obviously ideally wouldn't exist but does exist, that demonstrates the domestic benefit within universities that international students provide. And we think we'll be keen to ensure as we take the commission forwards that we really populate the work around that new narrative about demonstrating what international students contribute, both in terms of our economy, but also in terms of our research talent for the future. I'm now going to turn to Lil Bremermann-Richard. Lil is CEO of Oxford International, and Oxford International has a number of partnership colleges across the UK and a strong interest in improving the UK's international higher education offer. I think Oxford International also works internationally in a number of other countries, so recognises the importance of ensuring that the UK offer remains competitive as well for the future. And Lil, so I'm going to hand over to you to talk a bit more about some of your work and also why you think a new international education strategy is needed.
Thank you, Chris, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a tremendous privilege to be part of this launch event. As an organization, we believe in the transformative impact, the transformative power of higher education more generally, but specifically of the UK higher education sector. Higher education aids socioeconomic development and is a public good. We also firmly believe in the power of private-public sector partnerships. As you said earlier, we have a number of those across the UK, and working together, we can help drive strategic direction and promote solutions. Diversity of perspectives and voice delivers the best solutions. As Oxford International CEO, I'm extremely proud of the excellent work we do to provide quality-focused education services and courses that help unlock opportunities, international education opportunities for students and universities alike. Our vision for student success sits at the heart of our support for the International Higher Education Commission and its work. This is an independent review that we are supporting. It's being led by a major public figure, Chris, because the sector needs and deserves something that is authentic. The Commission is a unique opportunity, from my perspective, to bring together stakeholders from across the higher education sector, and it will include student representation, student voice, to shape policy and actions that will provide opportunities to people from all backgrounds. I think, Chris, something that you said earlier about the holistic student experience needs to be at the center of policy and decision making. It is clear to us, and like Diana said earlier, to me personally, that to ensure the future success for our sector, we need a long-term strategy for a modern international higher education sector. A strategy that will support the sector, reimagine what is in the art of the possible, from student recruitment to employability being at the center. I mean, there's plenty of surveys outcomes that show us that the reason students choose to study internationally is to improve their employability prospects. So employability, research, knowledge exchange, perspectives, and more. I mean, you spoke about the areas that you're planning to cover. I think collaboratively and committed to making a positive impact for our sector, I believe the Commission will seek to feed policy initiatives and considerations into the new International Education Strategy 2.0. And I was very excited to hear, Chris, that you're looking at working cross-party so that whatever we come up with as a team will influence manifestos from different parties when it comes to the new 2024 election. So that's really it from me and from Oxford International. We are sponsoring and huge supporters of what this group will do.
Thank you, Lil, and thank you again for your support. Now, we're able to open up to a bit of a discussion now. I've got a couple of points that have been sent to me in the chat function, but I think Pete French is first up with his hand. So, Pete, did you want to come in, either the question or a point you'd like to raise? You may need to take your mute off.
Yeah. Sorry, no, Chris. I was just applauding. Right. It was.
Oh, okay. Excellent. All right. That's great. Well, thank you very much. So we have a number of points, I think, that's being sort of raised in the chat. I'm just going to sort of, if anyone wants to raise their hand, please do so. I think I've got one from Johnny Rich, which I'm going to bring up. Johnny, did you want to, if you're hearing me, do you want to sort of raise this, or should I read it out? Which is basically,
I'll happily raise it if you like.
Yeah, great.
Firstly, to applaud the initiative. I think it's a fantastic thing to be doing, and long overdue. You were talking quite rightly about how this is an opportunity for the sector to articulate its message more clearly. I think it needs to go beyond the sector as well, and we need to be engaging businesses and employers in the discussion about the value of international students, not only the value, but the necessity of international students in not only in economic terms, but in cultural terms, and in order to create the international ties that are essential for the country in so many ways, politically and economically and socially. And I really welcome this, because you mentioned how often discussion of international students increasingly gets drawn into discussion of immigration, quite wrongly in my opinion, and the defense against that very often runs counter to the exact things that we want to say about higher education, about international students. We end up talking about how they bring in money as if they're there as cash pots, and how they're there to invest in local areas. Well, all of this happens to be true, but we also want to talk about the need for access for international students, the need for not just to bring in the rich, wealthy cash pots, but also to bring in students who will add to society in so many other ways as well. And that's why engaging employers and businesses and regions and communities and those organizations that get involved in providing accommodation and amenities and support is all essential to the potential of a commission is to bring in those other voices and get everybody talking together.
No, I think that's a really good point around addressing the question, which I think is also one that plays into the potential sort of damaging effect of focusing on the populist approach to international students, of saying, well, international students buy their place, at 3 times the price. How can we counter that? I think is a really important question, and I think one that we will definitely be looking to take forward. Louise Nicol has asked a number of questions. Louise, do you want to come in? You've got a great question on data and graduate outcomes. I think if you would like to contribute.
Yes, thanks very much. I'm dialing in from Malaysia. It's quite late here, but hopefully my brain will still work. It's the main 7% of international students have taken up the graduate route of the international student population, if we look at sort of rough numbers. And so that means that still around 90% and survey, in research by Biz previously said that I think it was over 90% return home. The part of this that I think is really missing is actually looking at those students that go home to successful careers and how we support them in successful careers in their home country. One, it gets past the whole populist debate, as much as I disagree with it. It is there and it's in the electorate. Unless we understand where these students go, we're not looking at UK soft power for the future. More than anything, we need to think about this 90% of students and providing them the support to transition to successful careers back home. And so much noise about post-study work just obscures by far the majority of international students.
I think that's a really interesting question. One is about, as you say, what we need to tool ourselves up with in terms of data and information that's open and transparent and is available for institutions to be able to use and to be able to transfer. And then I think secondly, that point around almost the diplomacy soft power element of international student outcomes, how we work with partner countries to create those student journeys beyond the university, and then also where is the opportunity to institutionally, whether that's working with the British Council, whether that's working with other organisations on the ground in those countries, to try to sort of maintain a level of engagement beyond the degree. I think is also something very keen to demonstrate that the international student journey doesn't necessarily start or end once the actual degree or length of time spent in this country has come to an end.
I think that's right. And I think universities need to know where their students end up if they're going to build their relationships, and government too, because the world's a big place. Telling a university, improve employability in China is a mammoth effort without knowing where their students end up in China. If every university took 5 employers from their key markets and built good relationships with them, the UK would be far further forward. And the data does exist and it is there. There just needs to be a will to invest in it. It's not, I know HESA's out the loop now, but, there are other sources. So, it's there, it's available. Should the Commission or anyone else choose to invest in those students that go home?
Thank you very much. And I think you'll be keen to work on that. So look forward to sort of taking these points up and using that data. Nolene Hammond-Jones, you've got your hand up. Would you like to come in?
Hi, thank you. I'm the International Careers Manager at Lancaster University, and I've worked with international students for 13 years, and I was previously for 10 years at the University of Manchester. So I have experience of working with international students from undergraduate up to MBA, PhD. And I agree with a lot of the points, and I think this is a fantastic initiative. I do think that the international strategy needs readdressing. And I know that you've mentioned this, Chris, with your introduction around supporting the entire student life cycle. It's so important, the employability aspect. Many of the students coming to the UK are not cash rich and therefore need that return on investment, but that also informs their decision making for institution. So although I agree with Louise in the sense that we need more focus as well on the international destinations of our graduates, I think the reason the number is so low for those taking up the graduate route is because there isn't that ongoing employability level playing field. They don't have access to equal opportunities. Employers are increasing the length of their graduate programs to exceed the 2 years on the graduate route, so they don't have to hire international students. There are many different things happening to create barriers to employment for international students, which is highly unfortunate, as we know the value that they bring, not just to diversify our communities, but our workplaces and add to our economy. And I think our students are feeling this, and bad news travels quick. You know, even though employers might not be hiring in some sectors, that does reflect then on the institutions, you know, who form these relationships with employers, who share the opportunities with, you know, that employers have to offer. But unfortunately, if employers are increasingly creating barriers and students have such a high level of rejection rates for opportunities, more than the national average for our UK students, then we, you know, there needs to be something done on that level as well with employers, to work more closely with them, to see the benefits of engaging with international students. And I mentioned some comments, I wrote some comments in the chat, but one of them was, you know, removing the fee with the graduate route to skilled worker route switch. That is a big barrier for a lot of employers. There is a fee for employers if they're hiring someone from the graduate route. So many employers, even in their job descriptions, will say, if you're on the graduate route, we will not hire you. And we know that they cannot discriminate based on country of origin, but employers will put their fabulous EDI policy on their job description and end the job description with, but we will not sponsor visas and we will not hire from the graduate route. So it's EDI is fabulous, but only if it's British. And unfortunately, it negates the entire concept. So I'm very passionate. As I said, I've worked in this industry. I'm the co-chair of the ADCAS Internationalization Task Group. I'm on ISEG. I work with BUILA, so I'm across all various different areas with international students. But the most frustrating thing is that lack of onward projection for these students. Is we bring them here, but after that, it's impossible for many of them to succeed. And they you know, the majority do want to go home. They want to reinvest in their own economies, but the number, that 7% that's been quoted, and I know it's been ranging between 7 and 10%, unfortunately I think it is that low because you don't have that level of engagement, awareness or contribution from employers in the UK. There is a very unwelcoming message, unfortunately, that comes across in the employment sector once students have graduated.
Yeah. Well, no, and thank you very much for making those points. I think it does demonstrate why, and I think Diana's sort of strategy had obviously covered local chambers of commerce as well to get that sort of you know, opinion and voice from industry, and how we create that sort of 3D approach to policy making here rather than the sort of traditional 2D dynamic between government and the sector and recruitment. You know, now we've got to recognize there are more active, you know, actors on the stage who influence actually what's the outcome. And thank you for giving some specific policy ideas about how to reduce some of the barriers, because that's exactly the type of thing we're looking for, you know, with the Commission going forwards. Sanam Arora and then Alison Hook. Sanam.
Hi, Chris, Lil, Diana, and David. Great to see you all here. Hi, we are the National Indian Students and Alumni Union UK, and I just wanted to make 2 quick points. Chris, many of your colleagues will know here, certainly Lil and Diana and a number of others on the call are supporting us in this initiative, but we're actually doing something called the India UK Achievers Honours, which is our way of celebrating the contributions of international Indian students in the United Kingdom for centuries that, you know, they've been coming here and and over the last many years, top leaders across sectors in India have been former international Indian students in the UK. So we are organizing a program where we will look at bringing out 75 such stories of incredible achievement of international Indian students. They may still be students currently here, they may be alumni back anywhere in the world or in India. I think it may be quite timely for us to, when those stories do come out in December, in the middle of December, to sort of perhaps share them with the Commission, because I think that might help counter the question of how do we counter negative populism regarding international students. I think Vivian Stern made this point a couple of weeks ago to us, where she said actually there's a lot being said on the data, and I think that was what was mentioned earlier on by Lil and many others as well. And that data about the economic benefits of international students is undisputed, but actually it's the human stories of success, of contribution and of achievement that may really help us counter that negative populist sentiment around immigration. So I think we'd be very happy to extend our support in whatever way we can to the Commission in this endeavor, and many congratulations for pulling it up. And the second very brief intervention I wanted to make was around entrepreneurship. I think what the US does incredibly well, as we all know, is Silicon Valley and that entire entrepreneurship mindset that the US delivers. I think in India as well, coming from a very Indian standpoint, entrepreneurship is a huge part of the ambitious young people coming out of India today. And actually, I'm not sure that we're fulfilling that entrepreneurship features as heavily as it can in our international education strategy, especially if we can create a sort of startup ecosystem that works for all students, but particularly for international students in the sense of extending all sorts of help and support we can to bring the best talent over to our country. And that links to a wider point as well, because I'm not sure that we're getting the best and the brightest. I definitely think we're getting the rich and the richest, particularly on the undergraduate side. So those were just a couple of points I thought I'd make. But thank you again, and congratulations on putting this together.
Well, thank you very much. I think that would be a very kind offer to be able to reflect upon, what are the opportunities and the demonstration of the value that's beyond the economic. I'm really concerned, obviously as a former minister that sort of brought the first strategy in, that we don't go down the wrong path. Obviously, America went down under Trump, which is to somehow think that this should play into a culture war, and all the potential sort of poisonous effects that can happen as a result of that. So really demonstrating the positivity. And I think that does come down to, as you say, and you're very honest about the point you made there, Sam, about how do we really drive quality into UK universities to demonstrate that it isn't about taking the money from students. This isn't just about making up a shortfall in cash flow, but also that sort of point around entrepreneurship, around research and development, the cross subsidy. Also, it's not just around the economic cross subsidy, it's cross subsidy in people as well. Individuals who come over here are the researchers who are doing the work, and so if we can demonstrate that as well in that sort of new narrative point I made, I'd be very keen to do so. We've got a couple more hands now sort of coming up. We've only got about 7 minutes left, because I'm conscious other people might have other meetings to go to. So we're going to go Alison Hook, and then Halima Masood, and then Albana Kalorini Baze, and let's see how we do with time. And then Nalini, I'll try to see if I can squeeze you in if that's possible. But Alison.
Thank you very much, Chris. And like everybody else has said, I very much welcome this initiative. I'm speaking on behalf of a consortium of 34 universities and other providers that provide postgraduate legal courses that lead to qualification, primarily a solicitor, but could also be barrister. And I just wanted to highlight the link into qualification in professional services, and quite often that does require the ability to be able to work after you've graduated. We know that, and I've got stats that I'm very happy to share, we've got 25% of all of those applying to do these postgraduate legal qualifications are from overseas. And the proportions have shifted dramatically between the EU and the rest of the world, but it still remains at 25%. And the impact that then has on UK soft power going forward is immense. because you then have people who are qualified as solicitors around the world, even if they are not practicing as such, they are more inclined towards English law and therefore to working with English businesses, with then inviting us to do other things, as, for example, has happened in Kazakhstan and various parts of the Middle East, where English law is then at the heart of financial centers. And I personally was in Kazakhstan, met with the Minister of Justice there, who said, I went to Exeter University, brought in all his staff, every single one of them had been a student in an English university. And that had then inclined them to say, actually, when we're looking around the world, who our international partner should be, it should be the UK. So I just wanted to reinforce that there is a professional aspect beyond this. And if we can link professional qualification into this strategy, that would be really, really helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we'll definitely take that point on board. Halima, would you like to come in?
Hi, yes, thank you. And yeah, it's been a great discussion so far. I am Halima, Policy Advisor at UCAS, so speaking on behalf of UCAS here. And as you may know, we are the main point of contact for international students coming to the UK. And we have access to a lot of data points. We have access to a lot of information and advice and guidance that we give out to these students to kind of make more out of that access that we have. We have launched 2 reports just this year, one on the choices, influences on choices of that international students make, and then also on their experiences of connecting to the UK higher education. One thing that is of interest to me based on that is the student first approach that you talked about. And I think that's quite relevant, especially in the light of this new strategy. Just to say, international students are maybe at some level considered as a homogeneous group, whereas our research shows that they are quite different in why they're choosing to come to UK, what their aspirations are. Are they looking to gather skills? Are they looking to go to a reputable higher education institution? And some of this has been captured in our report. Students from Nigeria have a different thought process than students from China, let's say, and this is something we are planning to look more into in the next 1 year. So yeah, just something for, I think, us to keep an eye out as well, and for me to let you know that this is something we'll be working on, and we'll be happy to share whatever we end up doing on that front with this group.
Thank you very much for raising that point. You're entirely right that while we have the umbrella of saying the terminology international students, sometimes, as language always lets us down, we can't necessarily, identify, within that one term, the variety of pathways and countries and ambitions and typologies that potentially are reflective in the international student journeys rather than journey. And I think the same point that's been made, obviously, both around having regional strategies from a UK perspective is also potentially reflective of looking at the regionality when it comes to looking at the different types of international students. And this relates actually to a point that Patrick Jack has raised from the Times Higher Education, which is that he's asked whether we should be looking, the Commission, will we be recommending a headline figure? You see, 600,000 was the previous figure. We've reached that already. I would be keen to address the question of the figure. I think for myself, what I'm keen that the Commission looks at is potentially we have sort of submissions and targets beneath the overarching figure. So it might be that we identify specific regional targets for Asia or for Africa, as well as obviously driving those into certain regions within the UK. But above all, if we look to be more ambitious and bold, if we look to go, there's a question of sustaining the 600,000 figure for the longer term, which is really important in terms of making sure we have the infrastructure and the capabilities and the capacities to be able to deliver on student welfare, as well as obviously the pathways. But if there was to be the opportunity to expand that figure, I think the conditionality there is that you have the housing in place, the accommodation, you have the ability to provide the best student experience on campus. If there is to be an expansion, where does that figure come from? Where do you need to look at where those pathways are occurring, recognizing that there may be some countries which potentially will no longer be able to be recruited from in the future? I think the lessons seen what's happened with Russia's war in Ukraine on our energy crisis, it should be reflected our international student dynamic, and that there will be a number of unknowable events that happen in the future. And how do we counter those unknowable events? How do we recognise the geopolitics of changes? And we've benefited from that when it came to obviously US's decision on visas in the past. The US is now in a far more competitive place. Figures today released by the Times Higher Education showed a 7% uplift in recruitment at the US. So we're reflecting a more competitive global market now, and there will be more English-speaking nations coming forwards with more attractive offers. So it may be that the maintenance of an initial 600,000 figure may be one pathway. I think the opportunity for the Commission is to model different scenarios, to say this is what we need to achieve if we want to stay on this particular 600,000 pathway. This is what we need to achieve amongst a number of other policy frameworks if we want to go further, but also reflecting that this is the opportunity potentially in individual countries and continents to recognise where market share can be best achieved, and also at the same time maintain that student sort of welfare for the future. So I'm very keen that we, as I said, turn it round so that we focus on the outcomes rather than the outputs, but we would be keen to identify target figures and with that sort of sub-figures beneath the overarching target. I'm just going to take one last question. I realise I'm over time and sort of poorly chairing this event. So Albana, would you like to come in, please? Final question.
Hello, everyone. My name is Albana. Thank you so much for putting this up together. Thanks to all the speakers. I just, there's no direct question. In fact, I am a senior lecturer in psychology working in Paris. But all you said was pretty much resonating a lot with my personal journey. I came to the UK in 2001. I did a bachelor degree, a joint honours at Oxford Brookes. Then I did a master's in psychology at Oxford Brookes. Then I did a PhD in psychology at Oxford Brookes. And once I was giving birth, had my viva at 33 weeks, I had to return back from being an international student from Albania, but also because I was awarded funds of excellence from the Albanian government. So I had to return and give my time back. Soon after that 5-year finished, I always try to find a way to gain more academic experience in the UK, in the universities, in research, and it has not been possible. From one struggle to the other, first one having to do with visa, but then later on, together with my husband, we moved to Paris as French citizens. I have tried to also apply from a different status, and then Brexit happened. So my point today is, yes, a lot of what you say resonates, and if I can help in other ways and have another meeting with any of you, if that helps your strategy, I would be more than happy. But I know that I speak for a lot of international students who, yes, when I look back at the amount of money spent to have an education in the UK, which overpasses £100,000 in my case, going back then to contribute to a country, then moving to Europe and doing the same kind of contribution, and yes, being an ambassador of the English education system. At the moment, the institute where I work collaborates with University of Roehampton, and I teach University of Roehampton courses. However, when it comes to having the opportunity to be back in the UK, we are competing postdoctoral students and lecturers who have remained in the UK for various reasons. And it's almost impossible unless I created some kind of a study that no one before, or some kind of innovation in the field that no one dealt or came across before. So I think the point I'm making is that the journey is real, it's painful, and yes, I do have a job and I'm happy with what I do. But going back to the UK to kind of contribute back to all the years that we took from, and right now I'm a chartered psychologist from the British Psychological Society, it has not been possible to have that kind of offer, to have even a couple of years of experience back there and not automatically to go and live there. So I wonder if that personal experience can also resonate to your strategy. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Albana. And I think that's a really sort of powerful point to end our conversation today. You know, your personal experience has been one where you've invested a large part of your life in the UK, and what are the barriers that are preventing you from the opportunities that you want to be able to contribute to life back in the UK? And I think sort of, you know, your voice is one of many when it comes to looking at that sort of future potential strategy that can be created to give opportunities and more opportunities to individuals like yourself. So thank you so much for sharing that story. You know, I think we'll be very keen to reflect the human narrative and the human benefit that basically a international education strategy, higher education strategy, can provide for, you know, so many people who want to be able to contribute to British life for the future. And thanks to everyone for listening in today for the launch of this International Higher Education Commission. Your support is deeply appreciated. I know a number of people have asked how they can be involved. The contact details and emails are below, and we'll be looking to appoint sort of commissioners who will be announced at the 12th of December event at 2 p.m. I'm also looking to get sort of ministerial representation, so we can sort of get sort of the opportunity to listen to the relevant minister about what their government's future vision is and how the Commission can align its priorities and principles with that for the future. But thank you once again for joining for the launch of this International Higher Education Commission. You know, this will be a open and transparent process. We hope you can join us on this journey and contribute to putting together a sector-wide contribution to what the future of the UK's international higher education strategy should look like. Thank you very much and have a good rest of the afternoon.